Lesson 44, Regression Analysis. Example 2. Use the Sierra College Elementary Statistics Student Survey to conduct a linear regression analysis to predict the number of hours a student studies in a typical week based on how many hours they work in a typical week. So in this example, we'll conduct a linear regression analysis. The linear regression model that will best predict y based on x is y hat equals a times x plus b, where a is the slope and b is the y-intercept. This regression model will be used to predict the number of hours a student studies in a typical week. The predicted variable is designated as y. So the predicted y variable is equal to the number of hours a student studies in a typical week. In the Sierra College Elementary Statistics Student Survey, the number of hours a student studies in a typical week was collected through question 8, where we asked the students on average, how many hours do you study in a typical week? Now this regression model will make its prediction based on how many hours they work in a typical week. Now the regression model bases its prediction on the predictor variable, which is designated as x. So we will base our prediction on x equal to how many hours they work in a typical week. And in the Sierra College Elementary Statistics Student Survey, question 9 asks the students on average, how many hours do you work in a typical week? So the data collected for the variable x is included in question 9 in the survey. So referring to our guide for conducting a linear regression analysis, we see that in order to use the TI-84 calculator to calculate the linear regression model, we first need to enter the predictor or x data into a list, and then we need to enter the predicted data y into a list. In the Sierra College Elementary Statistics Student Survey, we've already entered the data into lists that were labeled Q9 and Q8. Here, Q9, the number of hours the Sierra College Elementary Statistics students work in a typical week, will be our x variable. In question 8, the number of hours the Sierra College Elementary Statistics students study in a typical week will be our predicted y variable. So here we'll execute the linear regression command for question 9, question 8. To do this on the TI-84 calculator, we press Stat, arrow over to Calc, and then arrow down and select the linear regression ax plus b command. Enter. To get to the lists in the student survey, we press Second List, and then we arrow to place the cursor next to Q9. Press Enter to select, then comma to separate from the next list. Second List, arrow the cursor next to Q8, press Enter to select, and now pressing Enter will execute the linear regression using the question 9 and question 8 data on the survey. So here we see that the linear regression model that will best predict y based on x is given by y hat equals negative 0.22x plus 16.64, where a is the slope, negative 0.22, and b is the y-intercept, positive 16.64. Now, in order to determine if it's appropriate to use this linear regression model to make a prediction, we look at the coefficient of determination, r squared. And here we see that r squared rounds off to 0.109. So now we can make the following statements. The linear regression model that will best predict the number of hours a student studies in a typical week based on how many hours they work in a typical week is given by the formula y hat equals negative 0.22x plus 16.64. But since the coefficient of determination r squared equals 0.109 is not close to 1, the linear regression model does not fit the sample data. Hence, it would not be appropriate to use this model to make a prediction. That's because an r squared of 0.109 indicates that only about 10.9% of the variation in the number of hours Sierra College Elementary Statistics students study in a typical week can be explained by the number of hours they work in a typical week. Thus, relying just on the number of hours students work in a typical week will not lead to very good predictions for the number of hours they study.